When millionaire Michael Harrison walked into his mother's room that Tuesday evening in Charleston, South Carolina, he never expected to find his housekeeper, Sofia Martinez, gently stroking his mother's silver hair, while his fiancée, Victoria, Sterling, stood frozen in the doorway, a pillow clutched in her trembling hands. The scene before him would shatter everything he thought he knew about loyalty, love, and the people closest to his heart. Hi, I'm John Parker, and today's story will touch your heart. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give your like, it means so much to me, and leave in the comments which city or country you are listening from. Michael Harrison had built his empire from nothing, transforming a small tech startup into a billion-dollar corporation that dominated the Charleston business landscape. His penthouse overlooking the Ashley River was a testament to his success, filled with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and artwork worth more than most people's homes. But success had come at a price: long hours, missed family dinners, and a growing distance from the woman who had sacrificed everything to raise him alone. Eleanor Harrison, now 73, had been Michael's anchor through every storm. She had worked double shifts as a nurse to pay for his education, celebrated every achievement, and worried through every setback. But Alzheimer's had slowly stolen her memories, leaving behind a fragile woman who sometimes forgot her own son's name. The disease progressed relentlessly, and Michael found himself hiring Sofia Martinez, a compassionate housekeeper from nearby Somerville, to care for his mother, while he buried himself deeper in work. Sofia was everything Michael wasn't: warm, where he was distant, patient where he was hurried, and present where he was absent. She spoke to Eleanor in gentle Spanish lullabies, prepared her favorite southern comfort foods, and treated the confused elderly woman with a dignity that seemed to slow the cruel march of her condition. What Michael didn't realize was that Sofia was doing far more than housekeeping. She was becoming the daughter Eleanor had never had, and the guardian angel she desperately needed. Victoria Sterling had swept into Michael's life like a Charleston spring storm, beautiful, sophisticated, and seemingly perfect for a man of his stature. She came from old Charleston money, attended the right charity galas, and knew exactly how to navigate the social circles that Michael's wealth had opened to him. Their engagement had been featured in Charleston magazine, and wedding plans were already underway for a lavish ceremony at the historic Magnolia Plantation. But Victoria harbored a secret that would have horrified Michael if he had known. She saw Eleanor not as a future mother-in-law to cherish, but as an obstacle to her inheritance. In Victoria's cold calculations, every day Eleanor lived was another day her Alzheimer's care drained Michael's fortune, money that Victoria believed should rightfully flow to her as his wife. She had already researched the cheapest care facilities in South Carolina, planning to convince Michael that professional care was what's best for Eleanor. What Victoria hadn't counted on was Sofia's fierce protective instincts. The housekeeper had begun to notice troubling signs. Eleanor's medication bottles seemed lighter than they should be. The elderly woman appeared more confused on days when Victoria visited alone, and there were unexplained bruises on Eleanor's arms that Victoria claimed came from normal falls. Sofia's maternal instincts, honed by raising 3 children of her own, recognized the signs of neglect and worse. The evening everything changed began like any other. Michael was supposed to be in Atlanta for a board meeting, but a cancelled flight had brought him home early. As he climbed the stairs to check on his mother, he heard voices, Victoria's sharp tone cutting through Sofia's gentle murmurs. What he witnessed in that doorway would expose a truth so shocking that it would force him to question everything he thought he knew about the women in his life. But the real revelation was still to come, hidden in plain sight, like so many family secrets that shape our destinies without our knowledge. 3 months earlier, Sofia Martinez had accepted the position at the Harrison mansion with nothing but hope in her heart and calloused hands that spoke of years scrubbing floors in Charleston's wealthy neighborhoods. She had raised 3 children alone after her husband died in a construction accident, and this job promised the steady income she needed to finally breathe easy. What she hadn't expected was to fall in love with the gentle soul trapped inside Eleanor Harrison's failing mind. Eleanor still had moments of startling clarity when her blue eyes would focus and she'd remember Sofia's name, asking about her. Children with genuine interest. During these precious windows, Eleanor would share stories of young Michael, how he used to build sandcastles on Folly Beach, how he'd cried when she couldn't afford the bicycle he wanted for Christmas, how proud she was when he earned his first million. Sofia treasured these glimpses of the woman Eleanor had been, filing them away like pressed flowers in her memory. But Victoria's visits painted a different picture entirely. The first time Sofia witnessed Victoria's cruelty, she convinced herself she had misunderstood. Victoria had arrived for lunch wearing her signature Chanel perfume and practiced smile, but the moment Michael left for his office, her mask slipped. "How long is this going to take, Eleanor?" she had snapped when the elderly woman struggled to remember how to use her fork. "Michael's wasting a fortune keeping you here when you don't even know where you are." Sofia had stepped into the dining room just in time to see Victoria roughly grab Eleanor's wrist, leaving angry red marks. "Victoria, please," Sofia had said softly, her heart racing. "Mrs. Harrison just needs patience." Victoria's eyes had turned ice cold as she released Eleanor's arm. "Mind your own business, Sofia. You're here to clean, not to parent." The warning in her voice was unmistakable. From that day forward, Sofia began paying closer attention to the subtle signs of Victoria's abuse. She noticed how Eleanor would flinch whenever Victoria entered the room, how the elderly woman's anxiety medication seemed to disappear faster than it should, how Victoria would delay Eleanor's physical therapy appointments and cancel doctor visits when Michael was traveling. Most disturbing of all, Sofia discovered Victoria researching Sunset Manor, a notorious care facility on the outskirts of Charleston, where patients were warehoused rather than cared for. Victoria's plan was methodical and cruel. She had convinced Michael that Eleanor's condition was deteriorating faster than expected, suggesting that professional care might be more appropriate than home care. She painted Sofia's devotion to Eleanor as unprofessional attachment, whispering concerns about the housekeeper's boundaries and qualifications. Meanwhile, she systematically undermined Eleanor's health, ensuring that her condition appeared worse than it actually was. But Sofia fought back in the only way she could, with love. She began staying late without pay, ensuring Eleanor had nutritious meals when Victoria claimed the elderly woman refused to eat. She used her own money to replace medications that Victoria had accidentally disposed of, and she started documenting Eleanor's good days in a journal, recording moments of clarity and improvement that Victoria claimed were impossible. The housekeeper's protective instincts were rooted in her own painful history. Sofia's grandmother had suffered from dementia in Mexico, and Sofia had watched helplessly as relatives took advantage of the elderly woman's confusion, slowly draining her savings while providing minimal care. She had promised herself then that she would never allow such cruelty to happen again, and Eleanor Harrison had become the grandmother Sofia could finally protect. Victoria, meanwhile, grew increasingly frustrated with Sofia's interference. She began arriving for visits when Michael was away, using these opportunities to assert her authority and remind Sofia of her place. "You think you're so special," Victoria would hiss, "but you're nothing but hired help. When Michael and I marry, the first thing I'll do is fire you and put that senile old woman where she belongs." The emotional toll on Sofia was enormous. She found herself lying awake at night, worried about Eleanor's safety during her absence. She started arriving earlier each morning, checking for new bruises or signs of distress. Her own children began to worry about their mother's stress, but Sofia couldn't abandon Eleanor, not when she was the only thing standing between the vulnerable woman and Victoria's calculated cruelty. What Sofia didn't know was that Eleanor, in her moments of clarity, was beginning to remember fragments of Victoria's abuse, storing these memories like scattered puzzle pieces that would soon form a devastating picture. Dr. Rebecca Chen had been Eleanor's neurologist for 3 years, and she was puzzled by the inconsistencies in her patient's condition. During their monthly appointments at Charleston's prestigious Roper Hospital, Eleanor would sometimes appear heavily sedated and confused, while other times she seemed alert and responsive. "It's unusual," Dr. Chen confided to Michael during one visit. "Alzheimer's typically follows a more predictable pattern of decline." What the doctor didn't know was that Victoria had been secretly increasing Eleanor's anxiety medication on the days before medical appointments, ensuring the elderly woman appeared more impaired than she actually was. Victoria would arrive early, crushing extra pills into Eleanor's morning coffee while Sofia was busy with other household tasks. "We need to show the doctor how bad you're getting," Victoria would whisper to the confused woman. "It's for your own good." But Eleanor's mind, even clouded by disease, retained an animal instinct for danger. She began hiding pills under her tongue when Victoria wasn't watching, spitting them out later when Sofia came to check on her. During these clearer moments, Eleanor would grab Sofia's hand with surprising strength, her eyes suddenly focused and urgent. "Mia," she would whisper, using the Spanish endearment Sofia had taught her. "She's not good. Victoria, she's not good for my Michael." Sofia initially attributed these warnings to paranoia common in Alzheimer's patients, but Eleanor's accusations were becoming too specific, too detailed to dismiss. "She puts things in my water," Eleanor would insist during her lucid moments, "and she talks on the phone about money, about when I'll be gone." These fragments of memory painted a chilling picture that Sofia couldn't ignore. The breakthrough came during a particularly difficult week in October, when Michael was in Silicon Valley negotiating a major acquisition. Victoria had been visiting daily, each time leaving Eleanor more agitated than before. On Wednesday evening, as Sofia helped Eleanor prepare for bed, the elderly woman suddenly grabbed her wrist with trembling fingers. Her eyes were clearer than they had been in months. "Sofia, listen to me carefully," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite her frail appearance. "I found something in Victoria's purse yesterday, papers, about a place called Sunset Manor." Sofia's blood ran cold. She'd heard horror stories about that facility, overcrowded rooms, undertrained staff, and a mortality rate that should have shut them down years ago. "She had brochures, mija, and she was on the phone, saying I wouldn't last long there." The full weight of Victoria's plan crashed over Sofia like a Charleston thunderstorm. This wasn't just about inheritance or convenience. Victoria was actively planning Eleanor's death, using the notorious care facility as her weapon of choice. Sofia's hands shook as she helped Eleanor into her nightgown, her mind racing through the implications. How could she protect this vulnerable woman from someone with so much power and influence? That same evening, Victoria made her most aggressive move yet. She arrived at the mansion with legal documents and a smug confidence that terrified Sofia. "Michael called," Victoria announced, though Sofia suspected this was a lie. "He wants me to start the process of finding appropriate care for Eleanor. Professional care." She spread brochures across the kitchen table, each one featuring facilities with names like Golden Years and Peaceful Meadows, euphemisms that barely concealed their grim realities. But it was the conversation Sofia overheard. That night that revealed the true depth of Victoria's malice. Hidden in the pantry while organizing supplies, Sofia heard Victoria on the phone with someone, her voice cold and calculating. "The old woman won't be a problem much longer," Victoria said. "Once she's at Sunset Manor, nature will take its course. Those places have ways of speeding things along when families request comfort care." The words hit Sofia like a physical blow. Victoria wasn't just planning to warehouse Eleanor in a substandard facility. She was arranging her murder, disguised as compassionate end-of-life care. Sofia pressed her hand to her mouth to stifle a gasp, tears streaming down her face as she realized the full scope of the evil she was witnessing. That night, Sofia made a decision that would change everything. She couldn't fight Victoria through official channels. Who would believe a housekeeper over Charleston's socialite darling? But she could document everything, creating evidence that would eventually expose the truth. More importantly, she could become Eleanor's shield, standing between the vulnerable woman and Victoria's calculated cruelty. What Sofia didn't realize was that Eleanor's memories were becoming more than just fragmented warnings. They were forming a complete picture that would soon provide the key to Victoria's destruction. Sofia's transformation from housekeeper to protector began with small acts of defiance that Victoria never suspected. She started preparing Eleanor's medications herself, ensuring the correct dosages while quietly disposing of the extra pills Victoria would slip into the elderly woman's food. When Victoria scheduled accidental falls by removing grab bars from Eleanor's bathroom, Sofia would mysteriously find them reinstalled by morning, claiming maintenance had fixed them. The most dangerous moments came when Victoria would visit during Sofia's supposed lunch breaks. Victoria had no idea that Sofia often skipped meals, hiding in the garden shed where she could watch through the window, ready to intervene if necessary. Through the glass, she witnessed Victoria's psychological torture, showing Eleanor photos of Sunset Manor while describing it as her new home, or playing recordings of Michael supposedly agreeing to the transfer, though Sofia knew these conversations had never happened. But Sofia's greatest weapon became her growing understanding of Eleanor's condition. While Victoria saw only a confused old woman, Sofia recognized that Alzheimer's was like an ocean tide. The memories would recede, but they could also return with surprising clarity. She began documenting these moments in a hidden journal, recording Eleanor's specific memories of Victoria's abuse, complete with dates, times, and exact quotes. During one particularly clear evening in November, Eleanor revealed something that made Sofia's heart stop. "Mija," she whispered, gripping Sofia's hand as they sat together in the sunroom overlooking the Ashley River. "I need to tell you something about Victoria, something I remembered about her family." Eleanor's eyes were sharp, focused with an intensity Sofia hadn't seen in months. Her grandfather, Charles Sterling, I knew him when I was young before I married Michael's father. He was involved in something terrible at the hospital where I worked. Eleanor's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. There was a patient, an elderly woman with no family. She died suddenly after Charles visited her room. The nurses whispered about missing medication, but nothing was ever proven. The Sterling family has money, influence, they made it disappear. Sofia's blood ran cold as Eleanor continued. Victoria has the same eyes, Mija, the same cold calculation. She's not just greedy. This runs deeper. It's in her blood. The revelation that Victoria might have inherited more than money from her family, that she might have inherited a legacy of elder abuse and murder, sent chills down Sofia's spine. This new information gave Sofia's mission urgent clarity. She began researching the Sterling family history, using her limited internet skills to dig through old Charleston newspapers and hospital records. What she discovered was a pattern spanning 3 generations. Elderly relatives who died unexpectedly after coming under Sterling family care, always with convenient explanations and never enough evidence for prosecution. Meanwhile, Victoria was growing increasingly frustrated with Sofia's interference. She had expected the housekeeper to be easily intimidated, but Sofia's quiet resistance was becoming a serious obstacle. Victoria began staying later during her visits, trying to catch Sofia off guard, but the housekeeper seemed to anticipate her every move. "You're becoming quite attached to Eleanor," Victoria would say with false sweetness, her voice carrying an unmistakable threat. "I hope you remember that your employment depends on keeping appropriate boundaries." The psychological warfare intensified when Victoria realized that Eleanor was having more good days than she had reported to Michael. She began recording Eleanor's confused moments on her phone while ignoring the clear ones, building a false narrative of rapid decline. But Sofia was recording too, capturing Eleanor's lucid conversations, her laughter, her genuine affection for her son, despite her condition. The most heartbreaking aspect of Sofia's secret mission was that she couldn't share it with Michael. His love for Victoria blinded him to her true nature, and his guilt over his mother's condition made him eager to believe that professional care might be better than his own inadequate attention. When Sofia tried to hint at her concerns, Michael would brush them aside with comments about female drama and emotional attachments. But Eleanor's memories weren't finished revealing their secrets. One rainy afternoon in early December, as Sofia helped her with physical therapy exercises, Eleanor suddenly gripped her arm with surprising strength. "Sofia, there's something else, something about Victoria and Michael that he doesn't know." Her eyes were crystal clear, holding a secret that would shatter everything Michael believed about his fiancée and his own family. "The night Victoria first came to dinner here," Eleanor whispered, her voice steady despite her frail appearance, "she didn't come alone. There was a man waiting in the car, and when she thought I was asleep, I heard them planning something that had nothing to do with love." The final piece of the puzzle was about to fall into place, revealing a conspiracy that reached far beyond simple greed into the darkest corners of calculated betrayal. The man Eleanor had seen in Victoria's car was Marcus Whitmore, a private investigator with a reputation for handling the Sterling family's delicate situations for over 2 decades. What Eleanor had overheard that night would have destroyed Michael's world. Victoria hadn't fallen in love with him by chance. She had been hired by her own family to marry him, gain access to his fortune, and eliminate any obstacles to her inheritance, including his mother. The Sterling family's financial empire was crumbling. Charles Sterling's pharmaceutical investments had collapsed after a series of lawsuits, and the family's old Charleston money was nothing but debt hidden behind a facade of respectability. Victoria's marriage to Michael wasn't romance. It was a business transaction designed to save her family from bankruptcy and social disgrace. But the conspiracy went deeper than anyone imagined. Marcus had been investigating Michael's business rivals, looking for vulnerabilities that Victoria could exploit as his wife. The plan was to marry Michael, inherit his wealth after Eleanor's convenient death, and then slowly drain his company through strategic insider information and sabotage. Michael would be left emotionally and financially destroyed, while the Sterling family would rise from the ashes of their own failures. Sofia discovered this truth in the most unexpected way. While cleaning Victoria's coat after a particularly tense visit, she found a letter that had fallen from the inner pocket, correspondence between Victoria and Marcus, detailing their progress in Operation Charleston Crown, their code name for the plan to destroy Michael's life. The letter contained intimate details about Michael's business dealings, his mother's medical condition, and timeline for implementing the final phase. The letter revealed that Victoria had been documenting Eleanor's daily routines, medication, schedules, and Sofia's work patterns. She had been planning to frame Sofia for Eleanor's death, claiming the housekeeper had become mentally unstable and dangerous. Security cameras would mysteriously malfunction, witnesses would disappear, and Sofia would find herself facing murder charges while Victoria played the grieving daughter-in-law who had tried desperately to protect her future mother-in-law. Reading. Those words, Sofia realized she hadn't just been protecting Eleanor from abuse. She had been preventing her own destruction. The Sterling family had researched her background, her immigration status, her vulnerability as a single mother with limited resources. They knew she would be the perfect scapegoat, someone the Charleston police would readily believe capable of harming an elderly woman for financial gain. But Marcus had underestimated Eleanor's condition. While researching the Harrison family's medical history, he had assumed that Alzheimer's patients were reliable witnesses to nothing. He never considered that Eleanor might have moments of perfect clarity, or that she might remember details from decades past that could expose the Sterling family's criminal history. The letter also revealed Victoria's growing frustration with Sofia's interference. "The housekeeper is becoming a problem," Victoria had written. "She's too protective of the old woman and too observant of my activities. Marcus suggests we accelerate the timeline and deal with both problems simultaneously." The casual way they discussed Sofia's potential elimination made her blood run cold. Sofia realized that Eleanor's life wasn't the only one in danger. Victoria and Marcus were planning to eliminate anyone who might expose their scheme, and Sofia's dedication to Eleanor had made her a target. The letter mentioned specific dates. Eleanor would be transferred to Sunset Manor on December 15th, and Sofia would be terminated with prejudice on the same day, facing charges that would destroy her family and her future. As Sofia absorbed the full scope of the conspiracy, she understood that she couldn't fight this battle alone, but approaching Michael directly remained impossible. Victoria had been carefully poisoning his mind against Sofia for months, describing her as emotionally unstable and inappropriately attached to Eleanor. Any accusations from Sofia would be dismissed as jealousy or delusion. Eleanor's next moment of clarity provided the answer Sofia had been seeking. "Mija," the elderly woman whispered as Sofia helped her with dinner. "There's someone you need to call. Someone who knew about the Sterling family's secrets long before Victoria came into our lives." Eleanor's eyes sparkled with a lucidity that took Sofia's breath away. "Dr. Margaret Foster. She was the head nurse when I worked at Roper Hospital. She kept records, evidence that the Sterling family thought was destroyed. The revelation that evidence of the Sterling family's crimes might still exist gave Sofia her first real hope. But as she processed this information, she heard footsteps on the stairs. Victoria was arriving for an unscheduled visit, and she was not alone. Marcus Whitmore entered the Harrison mansion like a shadow given form. Tall, lean, with the predatory grace of someone accustomed to operating in moral darkness. Sofia had never seen him before, but Eleanor's sudden terror confirmed his identity. The elderly woman's face went pale as childhood memories of hospital corridors and whispered conversations came flooding back with startling clarity. "Good evening, Mrs. Harrison," Marcus said with false courtesy, his voice carrying the refined Charleston accent that masked decades of corruption. "Victoria thought it might be helpful if we had a little chat about your future care arrangements." His eyes swept the room, cataloguing exits and potential witnesses with professional efficiency. Sofia positioned herself between Marcus and Eleanor, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. "Mrs. Harrison is having her dinner. Perhaps you could return tomorrow when Mr. Michael is home." She emphasized Michael's name, hoping to remind them that the millionaire's absence was temporary and his return expected. Victoria's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Oh, Sofia, still playing the protective little maid. How touching." She moved closer, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor like countdown timer. "Actually, we're here because there's been a change of plans. Eleanor will be moving to her new facility tonight. We've already signed the papers." The lie was so brazen that Sofia almost gasped aloud. No papers could have been signed without Michael's presence, and Eleanor's medical power of attorney required his signature. But Marcus stepped forward with a manila envelope, his movements deliberate and threatening. "Everything is perfectly legal," he said, though the way his hand rested inside his jacket suggested he was prepared to make it legal through other means. Eleanor suddenly found her voice, stronger and clearer than it had been in months. "I know who you are," she said, staring directly at Marcus. "Your family destroyed innocent people for 60 years. My friend Margaret documented everything. Every suspicious death, every forged document, every bribe." Her words cut through the room like a blade, and Sofia saw fear flicker across Marcus's composed features. "The ravings of a diseased mind," Victoria said quickly, but her confidence was cracking. "See how confused she gets? This is exactly why she needs professional care." But Eleanor wasn't finished, and the fire in her eyes belonged to the young nurse who had once fought to protect vulnerable patients. Margaret Foster kept copies of everything in a safety deposit box at First Citizens Bank, Eleanor continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. "Police reports that were buried, medical records that were altered, witness statements that disappeared. She told me about your grandfather's victims, Marcus, all 23 of them." The number hit the room like a thunderclap. Sofia had suspected. The Sterling family's crimes ran deep, but 23 murders, spanning decades, painted a picture of systematic evil that took her breath away. Marcus's mask of professionalism finally slipped, revealing the cold killer beneath. "Enough," he snarled, abandoning all pretense of courtesy. "You're both coming with us now, Eleanor to the facility, and Sofia." He left the threat unfinished, but his meaning was crystal clear. Sofia would disappear that night, another casualty, in the Sterling family's long history of eliminating inconvenient witnesses. But Eleanor wasn't the helpless victim they had expected. Years of fighting Alzheimer's had taught her to treasure moments of clarity, and this was her moment to protect the people she loved. "Sofia, run to the kitchen," she commanded with surprising authority. "Press the red button on the wall by the telephone. It connects directly to Charleston Police Dispatch." Victoria lunged forward, but Eleanor grabbed her wrist with surprising strength, holding her back while Sofia raced toward the kitchen. "You killed my friend Janet Reynolds at the hospital in 1987, Eleanor said, her voice carrying decades of suppressed fury. "I was there the night your grandfather smothered her with a pillow, just like you were planning to do to me tonight." Marcus reached inside his jacket, pulling out something that glinted in the lamplight, but Sofia was already at the kitchen wall, her finger finding the emergency button that Michael had installed years ago but never mentioned to his mother. The silent alarm would bring police within minutes, and Marcus knew it. "We're leaving," he barked to Victoria, but Eleanor's grip on Victoria's wrist remained iron-strong. The elderly woman who had appeared so frail was drawing on reserves of strength that Alzheimer's hadn't touched, the maternal fury of someone protecting her chosen family. "Let go of me, you crazy old woman!" Victoria screamed, trying to break free. But Eleanor held on with the determination of someone who had finally found her chance for justice. Sofia returned from the kitchen just as Marcus raised his weapon, and in that moment of pure terror, Eleanor spoke the words that would save them all. "Michael is coming up the driveway right now," she said with perfect calm, and the sound of car doors slamming in the circular drive confirmed that her hearing, sharpened by years of listening for her son's return, had not failed her. Michael. Harrison's early return from Atlanta would later be attributed to a cancelled flight, but fate had orchestrated something far more significant. As he climbed the stairs toward his mother's room, Briefcase in hand and mind still focused on merger documents, he never expected to walk into a scene that would destroy everything he thought he knew about love and loyalty. The tableau before him seemed frozen in time, Victoria standing rigid with terror, Marcus Whitmore with his hand inside his jacket reaching for something deadly, Sofia pressed against the wall with tears streaming down her face, and his mother Eleanor gripping Victoria's wrist with surprising strength while speaking in a voice clearer than it had been in years. "Victoria has been poisoning me," Eleanor said, her words cutting through the silence like broken glass. "She's been planning to murder me and frame Sofia for it. And Michael, this man is Marcus Whitmore. His family has been killing elderly patients in Charleston hospitals for 60 years. Michael's world tilted on its axis. The woman he planned to marry, the woman who had shared his bed and his dreams, was standing in his mother's room at 10 o'clock at night with a man he'd never seen before, while his supposedly confused mother spoke with terrifying clarity about murder and conspiracy. "Michael, darling," Victoria began, her voice artificially sweet despite the panic in her eyes, "your mother is having another episode. We came to check on her because Sofia called saying Eleanor was acting violently. We were just trying to help." But Marcus made a fatal error in that moment of crisis. Instead of supporting Victoria's lie, his professional instincts kicked in, and he moved to eliminate the witnesses who could expose decades of sterling family crimes. The weapon in his hand caught the lamplight as he raised it, and Michael's business-sharpened mind processed the scene with sudden, horrifying clarity. "Put it down," Michael commanded, his voice carrying the authority that had built an empire. But Marcus was beyond reasoning. 60 years of successful murders had made him arrogant, and he saw Michael as just another obstacle to be removed. What he hadn't counted on was that Michael Harrison hadn't built his fortune through weakness or hesitation. The millionaire moved with surprising speed, tackling Marcus before the weapon could be used. They crashed into Eleanor's antique dresser, sending photos and medications scattering across the floor. But Michael's years of college football served him well. As they struggled, Sofia managed to call out the words that would save them all. "The police are already coming. I activated the emergency system." The sound of sirens in the distance confirmed her words, and Marcus knew his carefully planned operation had failed. But Victoria made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation, playing the role she had perfected over months of deception. "Michael, I was trying to protect you," she cried, her voice breaking with manufactured emotion. "Your mother has been accusing everyone of terrible things. Sofia has been filling her head with paranoid fantasies." Eleanor's response cut through Victoria's performance like a surgeon's blade. "Check her purse, Michael. She has brochures for Sunset Manor and documents about transferring me there tomorrow. She also has pills that she's been putting in my food, pills that aren't prescribed by Dr. Chen." Michael's hands shook as he opened Victoria's designer handbag, finding exactly what his mother had described. The brochures for the notorious care facility were mixed with unmarked pill bottles and handwritten notes detailing Eleanor's daily routines. But the most damning evidence was a letter in Victoria's own handwriting, addressed to Marcus, discussing accelerating the timeline and eliminating complications. As the Charleston Police Department officers thundered up the stairs, led by Detective Sarah Morrison, who had been investigating the Sterling family for years, Victoria made one final, desperate play. "Michael, you have to believe me," she pleaded, her mask finally slipping to reveal the calculating predator beneath. "I did this for us, for our future. Your mother was never going to get better, and she was draining your fortune. I was trying to protect what we could build together." The admission of guilt hung in the air like poison gas. Victoria had confessed to conspiracy, attempted murder, and elder abuse in a desperate attempt to maintain Michael's affection. But her words had the opposite effect. They revealed the depth of her betrayal and the coldness of her calculations. Detective Morrison entered the room with her weapon drawn, taking in the scene with professional efficiency. She had been building a case against the Sterling family for 3 years, waiting for the evidence that would finally bring them to justice. Eleanor's testimony, combined with the physical evidence in Victoria's possession, would provide the foundation for prosecutions that had been decades in the making. But the most profound transformation was happening in Michael himself, as he looked at the 3 women in the room and finally understood who had truly loved him and who had been using him all along. The next 72 hours would unravel a conspiracy that had taken Detective Morrison years to piece together. Victoria Sterling and Marcus Whitmore found themselves in Charleston County Jail, facing charges that included attempted murder, elder abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, and connection to a string of suspicious deaths dating back to the 1980s. But the real revelations came when Dr. Margaret Foster, now 86 and living in a Somerville retirement community, opened her safety deposit box for the first time in 30 years. The documents Margaret had preserved told a story of systematic murder disguised as compassionate care. The Sterling family had been operating what amounted to a death-for-hire service, targeting elderly patients with substantial assets and no immediate family. Charles Sterling's position on various hospital boards had provided access and cover, while his connections in Charleston's legal community had ensured that investigations disappeared into bureaucratic black holes. Michael sat in his mother's sunroom, surrounded by decades of evidence that painted his former fiancée's family as Charleston's most successful serial killers. Police reports that had been buried, witness statements that had been altered, and medical records that had been falsified, all preserved by a courageous nurse who had risked her own life to document the truth. 23 victims over 60 years, Detective Morrison explained as she walked Michael through the evidence. Your mother's friend Margaret was probably meant to be the 24th, but she was too smart and too careful. She knew someone was coming for her, so she created this insurance policy. The detective's respect for Margaret Foster was evident in her voice, but the most shocking revelation came when Eleanor, enjoying a period of remarkable clarity following the removal of Victoria's unauthorized medications, shared the complete truth about Victoria's recruitment into the Harrison family. She didn't meet you by accident at that charity gala, Michael, Eleanor said, her voice steady and strong. I overheard her on the phone 3 months before that event, telling someone that she had researched your schedule, your interests, your business partnerships. She engineered that first meeting. Michael felt the last pillars of his old life crumbling. The woman he had planned to marry, the relationship he had treasured, the future he had envisioned. All of it had been an elaborate performance designed to separate him from his fortune and eliminate the mother who might have protected him. The depth of the deception left him reeling, but it also opened his eyes to a truth he had been blind to for months. Sofia Martinez, the quiet housekeeper he had barely noticed, had been his family's guardian angel. While he had been building his business empire, she had been fighting a war to protect the 2 people he loved most, his mother, and, though she would never have presumed to say it, himself. Her courage in the face of mortal danger, her refusal to abandon Eleanor despite mounting threats, and her willingness to risk everything for people she had known less than a year revealed a character that humbled him. Why didn't you tell me? Michael asked Sofia as they sat together in his mother's room, watching Eleanor sleep peacefully for the first time in months. Why didn't you come to me with your suspicions about Victoria? Sofia's answer was simple and devastating in its honesty. Because you wouldn't have believed me, Mr. Michael. I'm just the housekeeper, and she was the woman you loved. Who would you have trusted? Her words cut deep because they were true. He had dismissed Sofia's concerns as emotional attachment and sided with Victoria's complaints about inappropriate boundaries. The legal proceedings that followed would make headlines across South Carolina. The Sterling family's assets were frozen pending investigation, and Victoria's marriage to Michael was annulled on grounds of fraud and conspiracy. Marcus Whitmore, facing potential death sentences in multiple jurisdictions, began cooperating with authorities, revealing details about Sterling family operations that spanned 3 generations and multiple states. But the most significant change was happening in the Harrison household. Eleanor's condition, freed from the chemical fog of Victoria's poisoning, stabilized remarkably. While she still had Alzheimer's, her good days became more frequent and her bad days less severe. Dr. Chen attributed the improvement to proper medication management and reduced stress, but Michael knew the real reason was Sofia's loving care. Michael found himself looking at Sofia with new eyes, not as hired help, but as the woman who had risked her life to protect his family when he had been too blind to see the danger. Her strength in the face of terror, her unwavering loyalty to Eleanor, and her refusal to be intimidated by wealth and power revealed qualities that his business success had taught him were rare and precious. As Charleston buzzed with news of the Sterling family's arrest and the exposure of their decades-long murder conspiracy, Michael Harrison began to understand that the most valuable things in his life had been there all along. He had simply been too focused on the wrong priorities to recognize them. 3 months after the night that changed everything, Michael Harrison stood in his mother's garden, watching Sofia teach Eleanor how to plant spring flowers in the rich Carolina soil. The sight of his mother laughing at something Sofia said, her eyes bright with genuine joy, reminded him of the woman who had raised him before Alzheimer's began stealing her memories. But more importantly, it showed him the miracle that love and proper care could create. The transformation in Eleanor was nothing short of remarkable. Dr. Chen called it the most significant improvement she had ever witnessed in an Alzheimer's patient. But Michael knew the real medicine wasn't in any prescription bottle. It was in Sofia's patient devotion, her gentle encouragement, and her refusal to treat Eleanor as anything less than the intelligent, dignified woman she had always been. Sofia had changed too, though she would never have admitted it. The quiet housekeeper who had once moved through the mansion like a shadow had blossomed into the confident guardian of the Harrison family. She spoke up when Eleanor needed something, advocated fiercely for the elderly woman's care, and had earned the respect of every medical professional involved in Eleanor's treatment. But what struck Michael most was how naturally she had stepped into the role of daughter, providing Eleanor with the emotional connection he had been too busy to offer. The legal aftermath of Victoria's arrest had been swift and decisive. Charleston's district attorney, armed with Margaret Foster's decades of evidence and the testimonies of surviving victims' families, had built an ironclad case that reached back to the 1960s. Victoria Sterling faced charges in 3 states, while Marcus Whitmore's cooperation had led to the exposure of a network of corrupt officials who had enabled the Sterling family's crimes for generations. But the most profound change was happening in Michael's heart. The businessman who had once measured success in quarterly profits and market share had begun to understand that the greatest wealth was measured in moments. Eleanor's clear-eyed recognition when he entered the room, Sofia's gentle humming as she prepared his mother's favorite meals, the peace that filled the mansion when it was occupied by people who genuinely cared for each other. Michael had offered Sofia a substantial raise, a new title as Eleanor's personal care coordinator and her own apartment in the mansion's guest wing. But what surprised him was how she had negotiated for her children's education instead. "Mr. Michael," she had said with quiet dignity, "I don't need more money for myself, but my daughter Carmen dreams of becoming a nurse, and my son Diego wants to study engineering. If you really want to thank me, help them build their futures." The request revealed so much about Sofia's character, her selflessness, her vision for her family's future, and her understanding that true generosity created opportunities rather than dependence. Michael not only agreed to fund her children's education, but established a scholarship program at the Medical University of South Carolina in Margaret Foster's name, ensuring that other young people could follow their dreams of protecting the vulnerable. As spring turned to summer, the Harrison household settled into a new rhythm that felt more like family than employer and employee relationships. Eleanor's good days outnumbered her difficult ones, and even her confused moments were gentler, cushioned by the love that surrounded her. Sofia's children, Carmen and Diego, began spending time at the mansion, filling it with the laughter and energy that had been missing for years. Michael found himself looking forward to evenings at home instead of networking events, to quiet dinners with his mother and Sofia instead of business meetings that stretched past midnight. He discovered that Eleanor still remembered stories from his childhood that he had forgotten, and that Sofia's wisdom about life and relationships often surpassed his own, despite their different backgrounds. The moment that sealed his transformation came on a warm July evening as they sat together on the mansion's wraparound porch, watching Eleanor play cards with Sofia's daughter Carmen. "Mr. Michael," Sofia said softly, "I need to tell you something. I've been offered another position, caring for an elderly gentleman in Savannah. The pay is much better, and my family thinks I should take it." The thought of losing Sofia sent panic through Michael's chest, not just because of Eleanor's care, though that was crucial, but because Sofia had become the heart of their family. Her potential departure forced him to confront feelings he had been suppressing for months, feelings that went far beyond gratitude and respect into territory that scared and exhilarated him in equal measure. But Sofia's next words revealed that she understood him better than he understood himself, and that the woman who had saved his mother's life was about to save his heart as well. "But I'm not going," Sofia said with a smile that held all the warmth of a Carolina sunrise. "I realized something these past months, Mr. Michael. Home isn't a place. It's the people who love you unconditionally, who see the best in you even when you can't see it yourself, who stand by you when the whole world falls apart." She paused, her eyes meeting his with quiet intensity. "I found my home here, with you and Eleanor. Nothing could make me leave my family." The word family hung in the evening air like a benediction, and Michael felt tears he hadn't shed since childhood burning behind his eyes. This woman, who had come into his life as hired help, had taught him lessons about love, loyalty, and courage that his Harvard MBA had never covered. She had risked everything to protect his mother, stood up to killers to defend their family, and asked for nothing in return except the chance to keep caring for the people she loved. "Sofia," Michael said, his voice rough with emotion, "I need to tell you something. When I thought about losing you tonight, I realized that somewhere along the way you stopped being our housekeeper and became—" He struggled for words that could encompass the transformation she had created in their lives and in his heart. "I know," Sofia said gently, placing her hand over his. "I stopped being your employee the night I decided Eleanor's life was worth more than my job security. That's when we became family, whether we admitted it or not." Eleanor, who had been quietly listening from her rocking chair, spoke up with the clarity that had become more frequent since Victoria's poisoning ended. "Mija," she said to Sofia, "I always dreamed of having a daughter. And Michael, I always hoped you would find someone who loved you for your heart, not your bank account. Sometimes God answers prayers in ways we never expect." The wedding took place 6 months later in the mansion's garden, surrounded by the flowers that Eleanor and Sofia had planted together during those early days of healing. It wasn't the elaborate Charleston society affair that Michael's marriage to Victoria would have been. Instead, it was an intimate celebration attended by the people who truly mattered. Sofia's children, Margaret Foster in a place of honor, Detective Morrison who had become a family friend, and dozens of patients whose lives had been saved by exposing the Sterling conspiracy. Eleanor walked Sofia down the aisle, her step steady and her smile radiant, proving that love really could work miracles. The bride wore her grandmother's simple white dress, and the groom wore his father's wedding ring, connecting their new beginning to the generations of love that had come before. But the most beautiful moment came during their vows, when Sofia promised to love Michael in sickness and health, in wealth and poverty, in clarity and confusion, making it clear that her commitment extended to Eleanor as well. And when Michael vowed to honor the woman who taught me that true strength comes from protecting those who cannot protect themselves, there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. The Sterling conspiracy trials became a landmark case in elder abuse, law leading to reforms that protected vulnerable patients across the Southeast. Victoria Sterling received 3 consecutive life sentences, while Marcus Whitmore's cooperation earned him 25 years in federal prison. The Sterling family fortune was distributed to the victims' families, finally providing justice that had been denied for decades. Eleanor's condition continued to improve under Sofia's loving care, and while Alzheimer's still claimed some of her memories, the disease's progression slowed dramatically. She lived to see Sofia's daughter Carmen graduate from nursing school and to dance at Sofia's son Diego's wedding. Most importantly, she lived to hold her first grandchild, Sofia and Michael's son, whom they named David Foster Harrison, in honor of the brave nurse who had preserved the evidence that saved their lives. As Michael reflected on the journey that had brought them together, he realized that Victoria's betrayal, terrible as it was, had been a gift in disguise. It had forced him to see what he had been blind to, that real love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect facades, but about showing up every day, choosing to care even when it was difficult, and finding strength in vulnerability. I'm John Parker, and remember, every story hides a truth. The truth in Michael's story is that sometimes the people we overlook are the ones who end up saving us, and that family isn't just about blood. It's about the bonds we choose to honor and protect. If this story touched your heart, please let me know in the comments which city or country you're listening from. Your support helps us reach more people who need to hear these stories of hope and redemption. And don't forget to subscribe to Invisible Hearts for more stories that prove love always finds a way, even in the darkest moments. Until next time, remember that every act of kindness creates ripples that can change the world.